She freed a wolf trapped in iron chains. When he shifted, the Alpha King marked and claimed her. The moon hung low in the sky, silver and soft, spilling its light over the twisted roots and fallen branches. Alara walked carefully along the narrow path, her small satchel clutched in one hand, the other brushing against the rough bark of the ancient trees. She had always felt at home among the forest's whispers, its soft, secretive songs. Tonight, however, the air felt different. It was heavier, charged with something she could not name. Even the wind seemed to hesitate before it moved, as if it too was afraid of what lay ahead. Alara tightened her cloak around her shoulders and continued, her heart beating a little faster, not from fear, but from an unfamiliar sense of anticipation. She was searching for herbs. Her work as a healer required plants that grew only under the light of the full moon. But deeper in her heart she knew she was drawn by something else, something unseen, something waiting. As she reached a small clearing, the air changed entirely. The smell of iron, sharp and cold, filled her senses. Her eyes widened and she froze. There, lying in the center of the clearing, was a wolf. Not a small wolf, but a creature massive and powerful. Its fur shone silver in the moonlight, eyes dark and sharp, filled with a strange intelligence. Yet what shocked her most were the chains. Thick iron chains bound the wolf's strong legs, wrapping around its body and pressing into its fur. The wolf lifted its head slowly, its gaze locking with hers. Alara felt her breath catch. There was pain in those eyes, yes, but also something else, an anger and even more surprisingly, a silent plea. He was not just an animal, she could feel it in her bones. He was something far older, far greater than anything she had ever known. You shouldn't be here," she whispered, though her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. The wolf growled softly, a low sound that echoed in the trees. It was not a sound of threat, it was loneliness. Desperation. Alara stepped closer despite the warning in the growl. "I can help you," she said, her fingers brushing against the cold iron. She studied the locks. They were heavy, clearly made by magic as much as by metal. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked, whispering words she had learned from old texts and chants. She had always believed in magic, but only in the quiet, subtle ways, healing herbs, whispered protections. She did not know if this would work, but she had to try. The wolf's eyes never left hers. It watched her with a kind of intensity that made her heart ache. She placed her hands on the chains, feeling their cold bite against her palms. Her lips moved in a quiet chant, a rhythm she had learned from an old book of enchantments. The chains rattled. A soft glow emerged from the links, pulsing like the heartbeat of something alive. The wolf shifted slightly, pulling against its restraints, and she felt a jolt of fear. If she failed, would he strike? Would the magic rebound? But the thought of leaving him here, trapped and alone, was unbearable. She pressed on. A final spark of light burst from the chains, and with a sound like a sigh, the iron links fell apart. The wolf stepped forward, its massive paws silent on the forest floor. For a moment, Alara could only stare, stunned by the sheer majesty of him. His fur shimmered and his eyes, those intelligent, piercing eyes, met hers with a depth that made her feel as though he could see into her soul. Then, in a heartbeat, he changed. Not slowly, not painfully, but in a surge of impossible grace. His wolf form melted away, and where he had stood now stood a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, and impossibly strong, with hair like midnight and eyes that still held the wild silver of the wolf. His presence was overwhelming, a mix of danger and beauty that made Alara step back, instinctively. You freed me," he said, his voice low, deep, and musical like the echo of the forest itself. "Do you know what that means?" Alara swallowed hard. I only wanted to help," she whispered. He studied her carefully as if weighing her very soul. "Few dare touch the chains that bound me," he said. "Even fewer live to regret it." A shiver ran through her, not of fear, but of something more complicated. This man, this Alpha King, carried centuries of power and pain in his gaze. She could feel it pressing against her, testing her, demanding her courage. And yet beneath it there was something fragile, something hidden. "You are not afraid," he said, the corner of his mouth tilting slightly. "Most would have fled the moment they saw me. Her voice faltered. She didn't know why she wasn't afraid. Maybe it was the wolf she had seen, the pain in his eyes that made fear impossible. "I had to." "You were trapped. You needed help." A sound like a laugh escaped him. It was soft, almost mournful, but there was amusement there too. "Compassion," he said, shaking his head. "A rare gift among humans, and yet it binds you to me now." Alara frowned. "Binds me." He stepped closer, each movement graceful, controlled, as though he owned the very air around him. "Yes," he said simply. "By freeing me you have marked yourself. There is no turning back." Her pulse quickened. She did not understand his words, yet a strange heat spread across her chest, a mixture of fear, awe, and something else, something she had never felt before. He reached out, not threateningly but deliberately, placing a hand near her shoulder. The air seemed to hum with power. She felt a spark, like an invisible thread connecting them, something ancient and unbreakable. "You are mine," he said softly, almost like a confession, almost like a curse. "Not by force, not by law, but by choice. And by choice, your heart will be tested in ways you cannot yet imagine." Alara's stomach twisted. His words were heavy, yet there was no anger in them, only certainty, a promise, and something else, a longing, a need that mirrored her own, though she could not name it. I don't understand," she said. "Why me?" He studied her, his eyes narrowing slightly, and then, for the first time, a shadow of vulnerability crossed his features. "Because you see me," he said simply. "You see beyond the chains, beyond the wolf, beyond the curse. Most look away, most fear what I am. You dared to reach for me." Alara swallowed. Her fingers trembled, brushing against the satchel at her side. She could not speak. She had never felt so small and yet so alive. She felt the pull of something greater than herself, something that both terrified and thrilled her. For a moment, silence stretched between them. The moonlight bathed them, the trees holding their breath, the forest itself waiting. Then he stepped back just enough to give her space, yet close enough that she could feel his presence surrounding her like a shield. "Come with me," he said finally, his voice softening. "You will need to understand the world you have entered. The chains were not only iron. They were a curse, and now, by freeing me, you have stepped into it." Alara hesitated. Her mind raced. The forest was full of dangers, of whispers she did not understand. And yet she could not walk away, not now. Not when the weight of the wolf's, or rather, the man's presence pressed against her heart. I will come," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. He inclined his head, a silent acknowledgement, and then, with a movement that seemed effortless, he turned and began walking toward the deeper forest. Alara followed, her steps careful but determined. She did not yet know what awaited her, what tests lay ahead, or what dangers lurked in the shadows. She only knew that she could not leave him. The forest seemed to close around them as they walked, ancient trees arching over their heads, the moonlight weaving through the leaves. It was a world both beautiful and terrifying, a world where magic hummed in the air and secrets waited in every shadow. And at the center of it all was the Alpha King. And now, she realized, she had become part of his story. As they moved deeper into the night, Kale glanced at her, a flicker of something almost like curiosity, or perhaps admiration, passing over his face. "The journey will not be easy," he said quietly. "You will be tested, and I will test you as well." Alara's breath caught and she met his gaze, feeling the invisible thread between them tighten. I am ready," she whispered. For the first time in centuries, Kale allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile. The wolf in him stirred, wild and free, and the man in him, powerful, dangerous, and ancient, looked at her with something new. Respect, trust, and a glimmer of longing. The moonlight fell across the forest floor, silver and quiet, and the two of them walked into the unknown. bound by chains that had been broken and by a promise that neither fully understood. And somewhere deep in the shadows, the forest seemed to whisper. Their story had only just begun. The road to Kale's kingdom was unlike any Alara had ever walked. The forest gradually thinned, replaced by rolling hills draped in silver mist. Shadows clung to the valleys and twisted around the ancient trees, moving as if alive. The air felt thicker here, heavy with a strange electric energy. Kale walked ahead of her, silent, strong, his presence commanding even the wind. Each step he took seemed measured, purposeful, like a king walking to claim what was always his. Alara followed, careful to keep her distance yet close enough to feel the warmth of his presence. "You must understand," Kale said finally, his voice breaking the quiet. "The world you are entering is not gentle, it does not forgive weakness. You have freed me and now you are part of it. There will be tests, some subtle, some harsh, but above all there will be secrets. You must learn to see them." Alara nodded, swallowing her fear. I will try." He glanced back at her, his eyes sharp and searching as though he could see every thought running through her mind. "Try," he said softly, "is not enough. You will need courage, and you will need patience." They reached the edge of the forest, where the trees fell away to reveal a castle carved into the mountains themselves. It was unlike anything Alara had ever seen. Towering spires of black stone stretched toward the sky, entwined with silver vines that shimmered in the moonlight. The gates were enormous, engraved with strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dark. Even from a distance, the castle radiated authority and power, yet there was a quiet sadness about it, as if it mourned for something lost long ago. Kale led her inside. The halls were vast and echoing, lit by torches that burned with silver fire. Shadows moved along the walls as if alive, and the air was thick with the scent of old magic. Courtiers lined the halls, bowing quickly when Kale passed, their eyes flicking to Alara with curiosity and caution. She felt their gazes weigh on her, some admiring, others wary. "You are not used to this," Kale said, his voice low, almost a murmur. "Do not be distracted by the stairs. Many will try to influence you, some will test you, some will fear you." Alara followed him through the halls, trying to keep her breathing steady. She had expected danger in the forest, perhaps even wild animals or traps, but not this. The tension, the unspoken threats, the weight of expectation that seemed to press down on every step. They reached a chamber at the heart of the castle. It was a room unlike any she had ever seen. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with ancient tomes, some glowing faintly, others humming with unseen energy. A fireplace burned with blue flames, casting flickering light across the room. And in the center, Kale turned to face her fully, his expression unreadable. "This will be your sanctuary," he said. "Here you may learn, rest, and prepare. But remember, outside these walls, the world watches. Every action, every word carries weight." Alara nodded, her eyes taking in the grandeur and the strangeness of it all. "I understand," she said, though her heart was still racing. Kale's gaze softened slightly, and for a moment the powerful, dangerous aura that always surrounded him seemed to fade, leaving only a man who had suffered, waited, and now had been freed by her courage. "Good," he said. "Then tomorrow we begin." The next day, Alara awoke to find the castle alive with motion. Servants moved through the halls, carrying trays of food and baskets of herbs. Courtiers gathered in quiet groups, speaking in hushed tones. And in the midst of it all, Kale walked as if the world belonged to him, a king among shadows, fierce yet graceful, commanding yet restrained. He led her to the castle gardens, a courtyard filled with plants that glowed faintly under the morning sun. Strange flowers, some silver, some deep purple, seemed to hum with magic. Birds with feathers like glass and silver flitted between the trees. The beauty was breathtaking, yet there was an edge to it, a quiet warning that nothing here was ordinary. "Alara," Kale said, his tone both teacher and protector, To survive here, you must understand the rules. This kingdom is not governed by law alone. It is governed by balance, power, respect, and loyalty. You must see what others try to hide, and you must never underestimate the danger of silence. She listened carefully, absorbing every word. "And what about you?" she asked, her curiosity daring her to ask. "Do you trust me?" Kale's eyes met hers, sharp and steady. "Trust is earned," he said slowly, "and you have taken the first step. But understand, what binds us is not just trust. It is something older, something neither of us fully controls yet. You freed me, yes, but now your heart and your fate are intertwined with mine. That is a bond that cannot be broken easily." Alara felt a flutter in her chest, a mixture of fear, awe, and a strange longing. She wanted to step closer, to reach out, but she held back, aware of the invisible thread that connected them and the weight it carried. The days that followed were filled with lessons, both subtle and demanding. Kale taught her about the magic that lingered in the kingdom, the way shadows could hide truth as easily as they hid threats. He showed her the ancient symbols carved into the walls, explaining their meanings, their dangers, and their power. And with every lesson, he tested her patience, her courage, and her resolve. Alara learned quickly. She had always been clever, but here she needed more: intuition, resilience, and the ability to see beyond what was visible. Kale's methods were harsh in their expectation, yet never cruel. He pushed her to her limits, watching her carefully, correcting her when she faltered, praising her when she succeeded. And always, there was the quiet tension between them, the way his eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking, the subtle brush of his hand when guiding her through the halls, the moments when he spoke softly, almost as if he were confessing secrets meant only for her ears. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Alara found herself alone in the castle library. Kale entered quietly, closing the door behind him. He leaned against the frame, watching her as she studied an old tome. "You are learning faster than I expected," he said, his voice soft. She looked up, startled. I am trying," she replied. He stepped closer, his presence filling the room, and for a moment words failed her. There was power in him, yes, but also a vulnerability she had glimpsed before, a shadow of the wolf, the man who had waited centuries in chains. "Trying is not enough," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "You must embrace this world fully if you wish to survive it." Alara met his gaze, her heart racing. I want to," she whispered. "Even if it's hard, even if I don't understand everything, I want to." Kale studied her silently, his expression unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "Good," he said. "Because tomorrow, your real trial begins." The next morning, Alara awoke to find the castle in unrest. Courtiers whispered urgently in corners, servants moved quickly with anxious faces, and a strange tension filled the halls. Kale entered her room, his usual calm replaced by a sharp edge of concern. "A rival sorcerer has entered the kingdom," he said, his voice low. "He seeks the throne and the power that comes with it. He also knows of me, of the curse that binds me. And now, because of you, he will notice you as well." Alara's stomach twisted. "Me?" Kale nodded, his eyes darkening. "Yes, you are no longer just a healer from the forest. You are the one who freed me. That alone makes you significant. And in his eyes, that may make you a threat or a target." Fear pricked at her, but she pushed it down. "What should I do?" she asked, her voice trembling but determined. "Learn, watch, listen, and trust only what you know to be true. The world outside your village is far more complex than you imagine. Loyalty can hide in plain sight, and betrayal can wear the face of friendship." Over the next days, Alara observed the court closely. She saw courtiers whispering behind Kale's back, noticed subtle gestures and coded glances, and began to understand the delicate balance of power in the kingdom. And through it all, Kale remained her guide, her teacher, and something more, a presence she could not ignore, even when the weight of the court pressed down on her. One evening, as they walked through the castle gardens, Kale stopped near a fountain that glimmered in the moonlight. "You have done well," he said quietly. "Better than I expected, but the true test is not what you know, it is what you do when fear touches your heart." Alara's breath caught. I will be ready," she said, meeting his gaze. He reached out, almost brushing her hand, and she felt a spark like the forest all those nights ago. "I believe you," he said softly, "and that may be the only thing that saves us both." The moon rose high above the castle, silver and watchful, as Alara realized that she was no longer just a visitor in this world. She was part of it now, bound to a king, a wolf, and a kingdom full of shadows and secrets. And in her heart a strange excitement stirred, a mixture of fear, longing, and a quiet hope that she might rise to meet whatever lay ahead. The forest of her past seemed far away. Ahead, only the court of shadows waited, and she knew that every step she took would shape the destiny not just of herself, but of the Alpha King who had claimed her, and of a kingdom that had long been trapped in darkness. The first light of dawn seeped into the castle through tall, arched windows, casting long shadows across the stone floor. Alara sat by the edge of the fountain in the garden, the silver water reflecting the morning sun. The calm was deceptive. She could feel the tension building in the castle, a quiet but insistent hum that seemed to vibrate through every stone and vine. Kale's warning still echoed in her mind. The true test is not what you know, it is what you do when fear touches your heart. She drew a deep breath, trying to steady herself. In her hands she held a small bundle of herbs, carefully chosen for their protective properties. But her thoughts were not on the herbs. They were on Kale, on the strange, overwhelming bond that had formed between them, and on the threat that lingered just beyond the castle walls. Kale emerged from the shadows of the courtyard, his movements silent, his presence commanding. Even in the soft morning light he radiated power. Alara felt her pulse quicken, a mixture of awe, fear, and something she could not name stirring inside her. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low, carrying both concern and authority. Alara nodded. I think so." Kale studied her for a long moment, his sharp eyes assessing her courage, her resolve, her spirit. "This is not only a test of skill," he said finally. "It is a test of trust, of heart, and of the bond that ties us together. The rival sorcerer has prepared traps, illusions meant to weaken us. He will try to divide us, to make us doubt ourselves and each other. You must resist. And remember, your strength is not in fleeing danger but in facing it with clarity." Alara's fingers brushed the edge of her cloak, the same cloak she had worn when she first freed him from the iron chains. She could still remember the fear, the desperation, and the strange pull that had compelled her to act. Now that same pull felt stronger, more urgent, as if it were guiding her steps. They moved through the castle gates together, stepping into the forest beyond. The trees seemed darker here, their twisted branches stretching like skeletal fingers, and the air was thick with enchantments she could almost feel pressing against her skin. Kale led the way, his senses attuned to every rustle, every shadow. Alara followed, trusting him but also trusting herself. After a time they reached a clearing where the rival sorcerer awaited. He was tall and lean, cloaked in deep green, his eyes sharp and calculating. Around him, the air shimmered with magic, and faint, twisting shapes seemed to flicker at the edges of vision. Kale stepped forward, placing himself between Alara and the sorcerer. "We know why you are here," Kale said, his voice steady, calm, and yet filled with the power of command. "You will not harm this kingdom nor the one who freed me." The sorcerer smiled, a slow, measured smile. "You misunderstand," he said. "I seek not only power but truth. The chains that bind you, Alpha King, are not fully broken, and the one who freed you," his eyes flicked to Alara, a subtle glimmer of recognition and challenge in his gaze, "may not be ready for what she has unleashed." Alara stepped forward despite the fear twisting in her stomach. "I am ready," she said, her voice steady. "We will face whatever comes together." Kale's eyes softened for a brief moment, gratitude and admiration flickering across his features. Then he turned to the sorcerer. "Enough words," he said. "The trial begins." The forest shifted suddenly. The ground beneath them trembled, and strange, glowing figures appeared from the shadows. They were not human, but neither were they entirely animal. Their forms flickered and twisted, as if made from mist and shadow. Alara instinctively raised her hands, murmuring protective words she had learned from Kale. A soft glow emanated from her fingers, forming a shield around them. Kale moved beside her, his own power flowing outward, shaping the shadows, guiding them, restraining them without harm. The two of them moved as one, their bond evident in the way their magic intertwined, silent communication passing between them without words. Alara realized then that this trial was not just about strength or magic. It was about trust, about learning to move in harmony with Kale, to anticipate his actions, to allow herself to be part of something greater than herself. As the figures drew closer, Alara felt a surge of fear. They seemed to know her weaknesses, probing at the edges of her confidence. Doubts whispered in her mind. "You are not ready. You cannot do this. You are only human." She closed her eyes for a moment, drawing in a deep breath, and felt Kale's presence beside her, a steady, grounding force. He did not speak, did not command. He simply existed as part of the bond, as part of her courage. And in that silence she found strength. When she opened her eyes, the shadows were still advancing, but she moved with purpose. Words of protection and clarity flowed from her lips, forming light that pushed back the twisting figures. Kale's power flowed with hers, and together they formed a wall of force that held the illusions at bay. The rival sorcerer's eyes narrowed. "Impressive," he said, "but the true test has only just begun." The ground beneath them shifted again, this time rising into jagged spires of stone, trapping them in a small circle. The shadows condensed into a single figure, taller and more formidable than anything Alara had faced. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, and it moved with a silent, relentless purpose. Kale stepped forward, placing himself in front of Alara. "Trust yourself," he said, his voice low, a whisper meant only for her. "Trust what you have learned, trust us." Alara nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest, a connection that went beyond words. She did not hesitate. She raised her hands, and the light of her magic expanded outward, pushing against the figure with force and clarity. Kale joined her, his own power entwining with hers, forming a bond that neither illusion nor sorcery could break. For a moment, it seemed as if time itself held its breath. Then, with a final surge, the shadow figure dissipated, scattering into motes of light that vanished into the morning air. The jagged stones receded, and the clearing returned to quiet, bathed in soft, golden light. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. She looked up at Kale, who stood nearby, his expression unreadable yet soft around the edges. He stepped closer and extended a hand to help her up. "You did well," he said quietly. "Far better than I expected. But the trial is not only about defeating illusions or shadows. It is about facing fear, doubt, and the parts of yourself you keep hidden. You have done that and more." Alara's chest rose and fell rapidly, her mind still spinning from the intensity of the trial. I didn't do it alone," she said. You were with me the whole time." Kale's eyes softened, the wolf within him stirring at the gratitude and trust in her words. "We are bound, Alara," he said simply. "By choice, by fate, by what you did for me. You have freed me, yes, but you have also freed yourself. That is the true power of this bond." For a long moment they stood in silence, the early morning light surrounding them. And in that quiet, Alara realized the depth of her feelings. It was not fear, nor simple admiration. It was something far stronger: respect, trust, and a connection that seemed to pulse between them like a living thing. But the moment of peace did not last. From the edge of the clearing, a whisper of movement caught her attention. A figure cloaked in darkness observed them, eyes glinting with knowledge and malice. The rival sorcerer had not been defeated. He had only retreated, watching, waiting for the moment to strike again. Kale noticed it too, his gaze hardening. "He watches," he said, his tone tight with warning, "and he will not wait long before testing us again." Alara's hands clenched, determination replacing exhaustion. "Then we will be ready," she said, her voice strong, firm. "I will not let him harm you or the kingdom." Kale's eyes softened, a rare and fleeting warmth breaking through the mask of his usual command. "I do not doubt you," he said, "and neither should you doubt yourself. Fear is natural, but it does not control us. We do." The bond between them pulsed again, invisible yet undeniable, a living thread connecting their hearts and minds. Alara realized with a mixture of awe and humility that she had changed. She was no longer the healer who wandered a quiet forest. She was part of a story far greater than herself, a story of power, courage, and love that defied time and darkness. As they walked back toward the castle, side by side, the forest seemed quieter now, respectful in its watchfulness. The shadows of fear and doubt had been faced, if not fully banished, and somewhere deep in her heart, Alara knew that the true journey was only beginning. Kale glanced at her, a fleeting smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Tomorrow will bring new challenges," he said softly, "but for now, rest. We have faced the shadows and we have not faltered." Alara met his gaze, feeling the warmth and strength of the bond between them. I am ready for whatever comes," she said. The moon rose again over the forest, silver and serene, and for the first time since freeing the Alpha King, Alara felt that the chains of the past were not only broken for him, but for herself as well. And somewhere in the distance, a faint shimmer of magic stirred, a promise that the trials yet to come would be even greater. But so too would the bond that tied them together, unbreakable, enduring, and full of unspoken power. The sky was painted in shades of crimson and gold as the sun rose over the mountains, spilling light across the kingdom. The forest that had once seemed so dark and dangerous now shimmered with early morning mist, silvered by sunlight. Yet, beneath the beauty, a tension lingered, as if the world itself held its breath. Alara knew the rival sorcerer had not given up. He was still out there, still planning, still watching. She stood in the castle garden, Kale beside her. His presence was steady, commanding, yet softer than it had ever been, as if the trials they had faced together had changed something deep within him. He turned to her, his dark eyes holding a mixture of pride, caution, and unspoken emotion. "The day has come," Kale said quietly. "He will challenge us directly. This will be his final attempt." Alara nodded, her fingers brushing against the satchel of herbs she carried. She had grown in ways she could not have imagined, stronger, braver, more certain of herself. And yet, as she looked at Kale, the weight of what lay ahead pressed against her chest. Not fear, but responsibility. She was no longer just a healer from the forest. She was a part of this kingdom, part of Kale's life, and a key to what would happen next. They moved through the castle gates together, their steps silent against the stone path. The forest beyond had an almost expectant stillness, as if it knew the confrontation that was coming. Shadows twisted at the edges of vision, but Alara was not afraid. She had learned to trust herself, to trust Kale, and to trust the bond that connected them. At the center of a clearing, the rival sorcerer waited. His cloak shimmered in green light, the air around him humming with energy. He stepped forward, his eyes sharp and calculating. "Welcome," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "You have grown stronger than I expected, Alpha King. And you," his gaze shifted to Alara, "you are no longer just an ordinary girl. You have tasted the power of bonds, and yet, can you withstand the final trial?" Kale stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Alara. "We will face this together," he said. His tone was calm, yet filled with an authority that seemed to ripple through the clearing. "Your illusions cannot break what we have built. Your tricks cannot divide what is united." The sorcerer's lips curved in a small, almost amused smile. "We shall see." The ground trembled beneath their feet. From the edges of the clearing, illusions sprang up, twisting, shimmering, ever-changing forms that seemed designed to confuse, to frighten, to separate them. Creatures appeared, some small and threatening, others towering and impossible, all shimmering with a strange, dangerous light. Ilara felt the familiar flutter of fear in her chest. Her hands shook slightly as she prepared protective words, but she remembered Kale's lessons, the trust they had built, and the bond that had carried them through previous trials. Kale's hand brushed hers for a brief moment, a silent connection that grounded her. "Together," he whispered, "always together." She nodded, feeling the warmth of the bond surge through her, steadying her. The illusions came closer, testing their resolve, whispering doubts into their minds. "You cannot do this," they seemed to hiss. "You are weak. You are alone. You cannot save each other." Ilara shook her head, her voice steady. "No, we are not alone." Kale's eyes glinted with pride and strength, and he stepped forward, shaping the shadows with his power, twisting them, bending them without harm, just enough to clear the path. Ilara followed, their magic entwined, a seamless dance of light and protection. The illusions pressed, and yet together they held firm. Suddenly, the rival sorcerer's form changed. He stepped forward, shedding the illusions, revealing a figure taller, stronger, and more commanding than any they had faced before. His eyes glowed with a strange light, and he raised his hands, summoning a swirl of energy that wrapped around the clearing like a cage. Kale moved in front of Ilara immediately, his body tense yet controlled. "Do not fear," he said softly, yet his voice carried across the clearing. "Your power alone cannot defeat us, but together nothing can." Ilara felt her heart pound, but she did not hesitate. She raised her hands, her voice clear, chanting words of protection and clarity she had learned from Kale. Light spread outward, intertwining with Kale's energy, creating a shield that pushed against the sorcerer's power. The two of them moved as one, their bond evident in every gesture, every step. Ilara could feel Kale's focus, his calm strength, his unwavering determination. And in turn, Kale felt her courage, her clarity, her willingness to face the trial without hesitation. The sorcerer's energy slammed against their shield, but it did not break. His eyes narrowed, realization flickering across his face. "So, it is true," he murmured. "The bond between you is stronger than any magic I have seen." Kale's gaze met Ilara's, and in that instant words were unnecessary. They both understood. Their strength was not only in magic, but in trust, in respect, in the connection that neither time nor shadow could sever. The sorcerer's power faltered, then wavered. He raised his hands again, but the combined force of Kale and Ilara was unstoppable. Light and shadow collided, twisting and dancing in the clearing, until, with a final surge, the rival sorcerer's magic dissipated. He fell to his knees, exhausted and defeated, his eyes filled with disbelief. Kale stepped forward, his expression calm but firm. "Leave this place," he said, "and never return. You will not harm this kingdom nor the one who freed me." The sorcerer hesitated, then bowed his head, acknowledging the strength of what he had faced. Slowly he retreated, fading into the forest, leaving only silence behind. Ilara sank to her knees, her chest heaving, but her heart was light. She looked up at Kale, who stood nearby, his dark hair glinting in the sunlight, his eyes softer than ever. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it." Ilara stood, her legs trembling but steady. "We did it together," she corrected, her voice firm. Kale stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet comforting. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You have grown so much," he said softly. "Brave, wise, strong, I am proud of you." Ilara felt her cheeks warm, but more than that, a sense of peace settled over her. The trials, the fears, the shadows, they had all been faced and they had survived together. The bond between them pulsed once more, invisible yet undeniable. Ilara realized with a quiet awe that she had changed. She was no longer the girl who had wandered the forest, uncertain and cautious. She was part of something greater, something powerful, enduring, and beautiful. Kale's hand brushed hers again, and she did not pull away. Instead, she felt a warmth that was more than physical. It was connection, trust, and something deeper, something that had grown quietly, steadily throughout their trials. "The kingdom is safe," Kale said, his voice low. "And yet the journey is not over. There are still challenges ahead, but you," his gaze softened almost vulnerably, "you have faced the shadows and emerged stronger. That is rare, Alara, that is precious, and it means we are ready for what comes next." Alara nodded, her chest swelling with emotion. "I am ready," she said. "Whatever comes, we will face it together." Kale's eyes glimmered, a rare, genuine smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Together," he echoed. The sun climbed higher, spilling warmth and light over the kingdom. The forest beyond seemed less threatening now, more alive, more welcoming. The shadows had been faced, and the darkness that had threatened the kingdom had been broken. But more importantly, the bond between Alara and Kale had been forged, stronger than any magic, stronger than any fear. As they walked back toward the castle, side by side, the world seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the courage and trust they had shown. Every leaf, every stone, every whispering wind felt like part of their story, part of the journey that had begun the night Alara freed the wolf from his iron chains. They reached the castle gates, and Kale paused, turning to face her fully. "You have given me freedom," he said softly, "and in return you have given yourself. That is a gift beyond measure." Alara smiled, feeling the truth of his words deep within her heart. "And you have given me courage," she replied, "to face what I could not before, to see beyond fear, to believe in the bond we share." Kale's hand found hers, fingers intertwining in a silent promise. "Then let us walk forward," he said, "together always." The wind stirred gently, carrying the scent of flowers and sunlight through the air. The kingdom seemed to hum with life, its magic steady and strong. And as Alara and Kale walked into the castle, side by side, the forest, the shadows, and the trials of the past faded into memory, leaving only the promise of the future, bright, uncertain, and filled with the enduring strength of trust, courage, and love. The Alpha King had been freed, the rival sorcerer defeated, and a new chapter had begun, not just for the kingdom, but for the two souls bound together by fate, courage, and the quiet, unstoppable power of the heart. And somewhere deep in the castle, the wind whispered through the halls. This story was not over, but now it was theirs.